Right, let's crack on with the show as planned. Now, a man who stabbed 3 people to death in Nottingham was not sectioned because mental health staff didn't want to seem racist. That's what an inquiry into his killings has heard today. Valdo Calocane is the man who murdered Grace O'Malley-Kumar, Barnaby Webber and Ian Coates in Nottingham in 2023. Damning new evidence shows that he was not sectioned back in 2020 after trying to break into a neighbour's flat during a psychotic episode because mental health workers were worried about, quotes, over-representation of young black males in detention. Why? Why does that matter? Calocane was sectioned 4 times in total, but they kept letting him out as well. Was that because they were worried about keeping another black man locked up? And he is not faced or forced to have long-lasting antipsychotic medication because he didn't like needles, apparently. And NHS staff felt that there was a pressure to avoid restrictive practice because of his ethnicity. So they didn't keep him locked up because he was black, and then they didn't force him to take his medication because he was black. What are we doing here? Seriously, look at the faces of these poor people, Grace O'Malley-Kumar, Barnaby Webber and Ian Coates. They died needlessly because of ridiculous woke anti-racist ideology. And what was this lunatic even doing in our country? Calocane came to Britain when he was 16, apparently, from Guinea-Bissau. He was violent towards his housemates. He was sectioned 4 times. One time, a neighbour had to jump from the first floor of her property to get away from him, damaging her spine. Why the heck was he still in Britain? But it's not the first time people have been killed or had their lives ruined because of the Diversity Brigade. Salman Abedi, the son of Libyan asylum seekers, blew himself up in Manchester Arena, killing 22 people and injuring more than 1,000 more. A member of the public reported him to security on the night that he detonated that bomb, but that security guard said he didn't want to challenge Abedi because he didn't want to seem racist. The quote is this: "I didn't want people to think I'm stereotyping him because of his race. I was scared of being wrong and being branded a racist if I got it wrong, and that I would have got into trouble." And then, of course, we've got the Pakistani rape gangs. Police forces in Greater Manchester, West Mercia, Thames Valley, South Yorkshire and West Yorkshire said they didn't clamp down on it because they were worried about stoking racial tensions or looking like they were racist. The initial inquiry into this, conducted by Baroness Casey, found that files had the word Pakistani Tipp-X'd out on some of them. I mean, how the heck have we got here in Britain, where the authorities think it's worse to be called a racist than it is to do everything possible to prevent a crime? 2 students and a caretaker died in Nottingham. Dozens of people were blown to pieces in an arena in Manchester. Thousands of girls were raped and sexually abused. And in all of those cases, more could have been done if mental health workers, security staff, or the police weren't too worried about being called racist. Well, hey, they might not be racist, but I hope they can live with themselves. There's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. And with so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. But this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. ExpressVPN is offering up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free. That's top-level security from just £2.49 a month, and you're covered by their 30-day money-back guarantee. So just click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code now. Remember, when you're online, you are often sharing personal data, so hackers can steal your information, your passwords, your photos, and your bank details in just seconds. But ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. So why choose ExpressVPN? Well, it couldn't be easier to use. With just one click, you are protected. And ExpressVPN uses military-grade AES 256 encryption, which is the same standard trusted by the US government to guard their classified information. With their new tiered plans, you can protect up to 14 devices at once and manage passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 months extra for free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN. Let's get thoughts from our panel this evening. Of course, we are joined by the Daily Express's Carol Malone. We've got Reform's Jamie McIver and Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. Carol, I'll start with you. This case here about Valdo Calocane and not wanting to section him because of the over-representation of black males. I mean, 3 people died, for goodness sake.
You know, why am I not surprised to hear this? When I heard this story today, I wasn't the least bit surprised. You know, the people who did this, NHS mental staff, you have to question their mental health. If they think it's OK to not detain a violent, lunatic psychopath who doctors in Nottingham had already said one doctor in particular had said he was very likely to kill. What is wrong with these people? You know, in this inquiry, they should be named, shamed, and then sacked from and stopped from ever working in mental health ever again, because they are dangerous people. Never mind the psychotics that are in their care; they are dangerous people, because they would rather, as you say, let a psychopath on the streets than actually care about the people who died. You know, Grace O'Malley, Kumar and Barnaby Webber were 2 young people who had glittering futures ahead of them. Ian Coates was a caretaker with a loving family. Those people's lives are snuffed out forever because of this idiot, but also because of these people who were supposed to be looking after him. It shouldn't matter what colour a psychotic's skin is. It doesn't matter if the ward that particular day is jam-packed with people with black faces. If they're the people who are a danger in that week, on that day, to our community and to the British people, they should be locked up. But they weren't. And that's because the NHS is infiltrated by workerism, and it's so dangerous.
It just shows how powerful the kind of anti-racism lobby has become, though. I mean, it's not just Valdo Calocane. It is, of course, also, like we were saying, the Manchester Arena bomber could probably have been stopped, actually. He might have blown himself up somewhere else in a less crowded place, and people might still have died. OK, but it could have been prevented from happening right there and then. And then, of course, you've got the rape gangs as well. And the common denominator is that people didn't want to seem racist.
Well, it's not actually powerful. It's weak. And it's outrageous. You should never have people in positions of responsibility who are responsible for the safety of the public. I'm talking about the police here and also people that work in the health service. They should not be doing those jobs if they have not got the ability to justify a decision and excuse themselves from the accusation of being racist. It is actually racism, in my opinion, to judge somebody on the colour of their skin. If you are letting somebody off because of the colour of their skin, you are judging them by the colour of their skin. But this is just typical of where Britain has ended up. This shows how far we have fallen. We'd rather our own citizens take a gamble on their safety and their lives just to excuse ourselves from a lanyard class, conversation at work where you could be hauled into the office because you've got too many black people in custody or too many Pakistani people have been arrested. This is why people die. And, it's all right, isn't it, Patrick, if it's not your son or your daughter being butchered in the streets of this country. It's all right if it's not your daughter being raped by a gang. And this is why the country is in such a mess, because we have got people, I think, on the left who are deliberately trying to poison people's minds and make people feel guilty just for doing their job.
Let's see. I mean, look, Sebastian, obviously they've got this case in Nottingham. I can't imagine how the parents or the relatives of these people are feeling. Similar, really, when it comes to the victims and survivors of the rape gangs. And then to find out that in the case of Calocane and in the case of the catalogue of police forces that I've rattled off there about the rape gangs, that they didn't do various different things that many people would expect to be done because of the kind of race ideology that we have. I mean, that's just... remarkably, it's a way to make it even worse for these people, surely.
Well, it reminds us of the value of inquiries. We talk a lot about them and we ask, what are they really for? Is there any point in doing them? And we've only learnt this because this inquiry has taken place. So there has been some value to doing that. And clearly there were failures. That's plain for all to see. What we have to separate this from, though, is a wider culture of what some would argue is institutional racism. I look at stop and search. You are much more likely to be stopped and searched if you're black. If you're black, you're also vastly overrepresented in prisons. You've got Islamophobia at a record high. You have many Jewish people who would tell you they don't feel safe, especially living in this country. Yeah. And so we have to look at it within a context of, if you are not white in this country, you are less safe in many ways.
Can I also say that the stop and search, this is exactly the kind of wokeism that I'm talking about here. Because if crime in an area has rocketed and it's a largely black area, well, of course, the people who are going to be stopped and searched are black people. We can't have a rule and say black people can't be stopped because it's racist to stop them.
No one's suggesting that.
But that is what's been happening, Seb. That's exactly what's been happening.
Well, no, the opposite has been happening because the statistics show, as I mentioned, you are much more likely to be stopped and searched if you are black. That doesn't feel fair, does it?
You are also statistically more likely to both be convicted of a knife offence and be the victim of a knife offence if you are black.
And if you speak to mothers who have lost their son, which is often the case to a crime like that, they would say, I'd much rather have a knock on the door from a policeman to tell me my son has been arrested with a knife as opposed to have a knock on the door say he's been stabbed because somebody has killed him.
But that's not the choice.
Let's pull you up on a word you've just used, because one of the words you've just used is exactly why this country is where it is. You use the word Islamophobia. There is no such thing as Islamophobia. A phobia is an irrational fear, and there's nothing irrational about being nervous and scared and petrified of Islamist extremism.
OK, so you've conflated two things there, Jamie, because Islamism and Islam are two separate things.
Phobia is when you see something like a spider and you scream. Nobody does that when they see a Muslim. And that's why that word is ridiculous to use. And it's that sort of terminology that gets people into a position like that poor security guard in Manchester that was too scared to report that. That's exactly words like that people are scared.
Why are you taking issue with semantics here?
Can we go back to Calocane here and talk about the people in our health service today who are making the decisions that those mental health care workers made? How can those people ever be trusted to ever accurately again determine the extent of someone's illness if they did this? They have to be chucked out of the health service. And how many more people is this happening with? How many more black people are being treated in this way under their care? Are we supposed to believe that black people can't be lunatics, that black people can't commit crimes? Because it's clearly not the case. But in our health service, that is the case. Yeah, they did this because it was a form-filling exercise and they didn't give a stuff about the lives that were lost.
Seb, I mean, just to speak directly to the decisions that were made here, it wasn't just the fact that he was allowed out, it wasn't sectioned, it was also the fact that he wasn't forced to take long-standing antipsychotic medication. Both of those two things were apparently because they were afraid that if they did that, they could be seen as racist. Presumably you think that was wrong, do you?
Yeah, I've said that already, but I'll clarify. I think there were many, many failures here. But what I don't want to do is jump to the conclusion, therefore, that we live in a society where there is no racism or where you are going to have a better time if you are black. Because I think in many ways you will have a tougher life.
This is an example of racism. This is nothing to do with racism. This is a bunch of people who were frightened of being branded racist. And what they did was they made an incredibly dangerous decision which resulted in the loss of three very precious lives.
I think we're agreeing here.
OK. Well, on that point, right, OK.